I was 13 when I realized my family had already decided who mattered. My name's Ethan. I'm 32 now, and if you'd asked me back then what kind of family I came from, I would have said normal without thinking. 2 parents, a house in a safe neighborhood, a dog that shed everywhere, holiday photos where everyone wore matching sweaters and pretended we didn't hate the whole process. Normal, but normal is just what it looks like from the outside. Inside, it was a quiet ranking system, a scoreboard no one admitted existed, where the points always went to my younger sister. Her name is Brooke, 2 years younger than me, the kind of kid who didn't walk into a room so much as arrive. She had that effortless glow, big smile, bright eyes, a laugh that made adults laugh back. Teachers loved her, coaches loved her. My parents, Diane and Victor, didn't just love her, they orbited her. At first, it was subtle, the kind of subtle you can talk yourself out of, like how I'd come home with an A+ on a math test and my mom would say, "That's nice, honey," while stirring pasta and checking her phone. But Brooke would come home with a participation ribbon from a cheer clinic and suddenly we were going out for ice cream like she'd cured a disease. Or how my dad never missed one of her competitions. Not the tiny ones in dusty gyms where the air smelled like old sneakers, not the long drives to weekend tournaments, not even the ones that started at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. He'd wake up early, make coffee, load the car, and wear the team hoodie like it was a uniform. Meanwhile, I'd be out on a soccer field in the cold, scanning the sideline between plays, telling myself my parents were stuck in traffic. They weren't. They just didn't come. Brooke wasn't a bad kid. That's the part that used to confuse me. She wasn't cruel in an obvious way. She didn't shove me down the stairs or steal money from my room. She just learned early how to pull gravity toward herself. If she cried, the world turned. If she pouted, people apologized. If she smiled, doors opened. And she had this eerie talent, this uncanny, practiced ability to cry on cue. Not messy, ugly crying, pretty crying. The kind that made adults soften. If a vase broke, somehow it was my fault. If she forgot a permission slip, somehow I didn't remind her. If she got a bad grade, somehow the teacher had it out for her, and my parents launched into a protective rage like they were defending a national treasure. I was the older brother, which meant I was automatically assigned the role of sturdy background. The funny thing is, for a while, I didn't even care. I wasn't wired the way Brooke was. I didn't crave attention. I liked quiet. I liked systems. I liked figuring out how things worked. When other kids were trading Pokemon cards, I was unscrewing old radios and trying to understand why they made sound. When our toaster broke, I didn't ask for a new one. I asked for a screwdriver. I started collecting discarded electronics like some kind of suburban raccoon. Old laptops, cracked phones, a printer that kept jamming and smelled faintly like burnt plastic. I dragged them into the garage and lined them up like patients in a waiting room. Fixing things made sense. People didn't. And there was something oddly satisfying about taking a dead object and bringing it back to life. By 15, I was the neighborhood tech kid. Parents of my friends would slip me $20 to remove viruses from their computers or replace a phone battery. I built a little website for a local pizza place. I started learning to code from free tutorials and outdated books I found at library sales. It wasn't glamorous. It was mine. But my parents barely noticed. If my mom did glance at my projects, it was usually to say something like, "That's great, Ethan, but don't spend too much time on that stuff. You don't want to burn out before you even get to college." College. That became the line in the sand. Brooke was groomed for it like it was her destiny. Elite summer programs, private tutors, a college counselor we couldn't technically afford but somehow still paid for. SAT prep courses that started before she even took the PSAT. My mom had a binder labeled Brooke Future that she carried around like a holy book. Me? I was told to be realistic. Trade school could be a great option, my dad would say, like he was offering me a gift. And listen, there is absolutely nothing wrong with trade school. There are brilliant tradespeople who make more money than most executives and do work that actually matters. But it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what lit me up. I wanted to study computer engineering. I wanted to build something. I wanted to work on systems that could change how companies ran, how people lived, how the world moved. But whenever I said that out loud, my parents responded with the same tight-lipped smile, the same gentle shutdown. Not everyone is cut out for big dreams, my mom would say, like she was trying to protect me from disappointment. The truth was, she was protecting herself from having to see me as competition to Brooke's storyline. So I did what kids like me do. I internalized it. I told myself I'd prove them wrong. I just needed results, a trophy, something undeniable. When I was 16, I built my first app. It was ugly, clunky, it crashed constantly, but it was mine, a simple inventory tracker for small businesses, because I'd noticed the family business, my dad's company, still ran half its operations on paper printouts and whiteboards. My dad owned a facilities management company called Northbridge Services. They handled maintenance contracts contracts, office buildings, warehouses, shopping centers, cleaning crews, repair teams, supply ordering, scheduling. It was a solid company. Not flashy, but profitable. My dad built it from nothing, and when I was younger, he used to tell me stories about working night shifts, sleeping in his truck, chasing contracts like they were prey. When I was little, I assumed I'd inherit it one day. Not because I felt entitled, but because he made it sound like a legacy, like something you passed to the child who understood the work. And I understood the work. I'd been in that office after school, filing papers, helping the receptionist, watching how the dispatch board worked. I knew the names of the supervisors. I knew which clients were difficult and which ones always paid late. I knew where the business bled money. So when I built that app, part of me thought maybe my dad would finally look at me with that spark in his eyes. I remember showing it to him at the kitchen table, laptop open, my hands sweating, my heart doing this humiliating thing where it actually hoped. He watched for maybe 30 seconds, then my mom's phone buzzed and she glanced at it and said, "Oh, Brooke's coach says she might be moved to the front row for the next competition. Isn't that exciting?" And just like that, the moment collapsed. My dad didn't say anything. He just nodded vaguely, like my app was a school project he didn't want to criticize. That was the first time I didn't argue, I didn't plead, I just nodded and closed the laptop and went to my room. Something inside me shifted then. Not dramatic, not a movie moment, just a quiet adjustment. Like when you realize a door you've been pushing on for years was never unlocked. The older we got, the worse it got. By the time Brooke was applying to top-tier universities, my parents were in full campaign mode. My mom made vision boards, my dad called in favors. They hosted dinners with alumni friends. They talked about Brooke's future like it was a national project. I was taking night classes at a community college and running a growing freelance business, repairing systems for small companies. I was making real money, enough to buy a beat-up car and start saving, enough to pay my own tuition, enough to start investing in better equipment. But my parents treated it like a phase, like I was just tinkering until I found something real. Then came the night that carved the truth into stone. Brooke got into a prestigious university. Big deal, the kind of acceptance letter people frame. I congratulated her sincerely. I mean that. I wasn't bitter about her success. I was bitter about the way my success didn't count. My parents threw a massive dinner party, extended family, friends, catered food, champagne. My mom wore a new dress like she was attending an award show. My dad gave a toast. And somewhere between the clinking glasses and the exaggerated laughter, he stood up and said, "We always knew Brooke would do something special. She has the kind of presence that can lead a company someday. Maybe even take over Northbridge." I froze so hard, I swear my body stopped functioning. Northbridge, the family business. I stared at him, waiting for the correction, waiting for the moment he'd add, "and Ethan too, of course," like I was still in the picture. But he didn't look at me, not once. He raised his glass toward Brooke, and Brooke beamed like she'd just been crowned. That's when something in me cracked. Not into rage, but into clarity. They'd already decided. I wasn't being overlooked by accident. I was being placed. I was the supporting character in Brooke's story, the stable sibling, the good kid, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who would be fine. Over the next couple of years, the truth unfolded like a slow leak. My parents poured money into Brooke's tuition, her off-campus apartment, her wardrobe, her networking trips, and a fashion startup idea she had that never sold anything but somehow always needed more funding. I asked once, for a small loan to upgrade servers for a client project. My mom said, "We're tight on cash right now." I didn't ask again. I took on more contracts instead. I started working stupid hours. I got better, smarter, more strategic. I learned how to sell, how to negotiate, how to build relationships. I took certifications online. I built a small team, 2 people at first, then 4, then 8. My side hustle became a real consultancy. I still went to family dinners, still played the role, still smiled when Brooke announced something new and shiny. But I stopped expecting anything from them. They didn't notice. Not really. As long as I was polite and quiet, I could remain invisible. Then came the pivot, the twist that set everything else in motion. 3 years ago, my dad called a family meeting. I remember it vividly because it was the first time in a long time he'd said, "I want to talk to you about the business." My heart did something humiliating again. It leapt. For a second, I thought maybe he finally saw me. He didn't. He announced he was retiring early and wanted to transition Northbridge into a new era. That's how he phrased it. He'd been thinking hard about who should take over. And after careful consideration, he decided it was time to bring Brooke in as CEO. CEO, Brooke, who had never worked a full week in her life without getting bored and quitting. Brooke, who thought being busy meant answering emails from a coffee shop and taking selfies with a laptop open. Brooke, who talked about vibes and brand energy energy, like they were actual operating metrics. My dad said she understood modern leadership, storytelling, branding. He said those were more important now than operations. I asked calmly what would happen to the management team, to the supervisors, to the people who'd been with the company for decades. He said, they'll adapt. It's time for fresh blood. And me? I asked. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it. He smiled like he pitied me. Ethan, you're doing well in your own way, but this just isn't your lane. That sentence lodged under my skin like a splinter. This isn't your lane. Brooke took over, and predictably, everything started to rot. At first it was slow, small cracks that my parents ignored because acknowledging them would mean acknowledging they'd been wrong. Brooke lost a few clients, blamed outdated relationships. She fired the operations director, an older guy named Stan, who had basically built the dispatch system from scratch because he didn't match the new culture. She hired her college friends. Suddenly, Northbridge had a brand director and a culture lead. The company got a new logo that looked like a tech startup, but the crew still didn't have enough supplies because someone forgot to reorder basic inventory. She switched software to a flashy platform none of the supervisors understood. Dispatching turned into chaos. Schedules got missed. Crews showed up to the wrong buildings. Vendors got paid late. Clients started quietly leaving one by one. The way people slip out of a party when the music turns bad. My parents defended her through all of it. She's finding her footing, my mom said. She just needs time, my dad insisted, even as his face got more tired. I stayed out of it. I focused on my company. By then, my consultancy had evolved into something bigger. We were building automation tools for mid-sized businesses. We had clients in 3 countries. We were profitable, quietly, solidly profitable. I didn't brag. I didn't rub it in. I didn't even tell my parents details because they never asked. Then, a few months ago, my mom called me and her voice sounded fragile. Ethan, she said, we need to talk. It's about Northbridge. I leaned back in my chair, staring at my second monitor where a contract negotiation was open. One of our biggest deals had just cleared. 6 figures, almost 7. I didn't mention it. Okay, I said. What's going on? There was a pause, a long one. It's bad, she whispered. Brooke made some mistakes, big ones. The company's in trouble. We don't know how to keep the lights on. Then she said the words that should have felt satisfying, but didn't. We were wondering if you could come by and take a look. That was the moment. Because it wasn't just that they needed help, it was that they sounded surprised that I could help, like they'd forgotten I existed until they ran out of options. I didn't go over right away. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I needed to feel it. I needed to feel what it was like for them to need me first, after years of me waiting in the wings like an unpaid understudy. My mom texted me the next day. I know you're busy, but this is serious. Dad is worried. We could really use your insight. Insight, like I hadn't been quietly building an entire career while they spent a decade investing in Brooke's spotlight. I agreed to come by later that week. I didn't wear a suit. I wore jeans and a hoodie. Partly because that's what I wore most days, and partly because I wanted to remind them of the version of me they'd filed away. The garage kid, the tinkerer, the one they decided didn't look like success. My mom opened the door and she looked older. Not just older, worn. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot. Her eyes were puffy like she'd been crying or not sleeping or both. Ethan, she said, hugging me too tightly, it's really bad. The house looked the same, but the energy didn't. It felt like a set after the audience has left. Furniture in place, lights on, but something hollow in the air. My dad sat stiff on the couch, staring at a folder like it was full of funeral paperwork. Brooke wasn't there. She's meeting with a consultant, my mom explained, wringing her hands. A branding coach. She says it's crucial right now. I didn't respond. I just sat down and waited. They laid it out. They'd lost 3 major contracts in 2 months. Payroll had bounced. The bank had frozen their credit line. There was a vendor lawsuit brewing. A supervisor had quit and taken half the scheduling knowledge with him. Brooke had signed a long-term lease on a fancy downtown office space because she thought it would level up the company image. The thing about businesses like Northbridge is they don't survive on image. They survive on reliability, on showing up, on quiet competence. Brooke had traded competence for aesthetics. I flipped through the financials, read everywhere. Late fees, penalties, a ridiculous line item for social media strategy. And you let this happen? I asked, keeping my voice flat. My dad didn't meet my eyes. We thought she just needed more time. My mom added quickly, she's under so much pressure. Then my dad said something that almost made me laugh, if it hadn't been so insulting. You know how hard it is for women in leadership. I've worked with incredible women. Brilliant, ruthless, kind, visionary, technical, strategic. Brooke didn't lack opportunity. She lacked accountability, and my parents had wrapped slapped that lack in protective language because it was easier than admitting they'd built a fantasy. They didn't ask me directly to take over. Not yet. They asked if I could look at the systems, recommend someone, help guide Brooke. They wanted a solution that didn't require admitting Brooke was the problem. I told them I'd need access, full access, bank statements, contracts, software, HR records. They agreed instantly. My dad even muttered, "We should have brought you in earlier." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get. When I saw Brooke the next week, she breezed into the office like nothing was wrong. Sunglasses on her head, nails perfect, coffee in hand. "Oh, hey," she said like I was a contractor hired to fix a printer. "You're here to do the tech stuff, right?" I looked at her, waiting for any flicker of humility. She smirked. "Don't worry, I won't get in your way. I know it's more your speed, numbers and spreadsheets and all that." She still saw me as the garage kid. Meanwhile, the building was on fire, and she couldn't smell the smoke. Over the next few weeks, I dug in, and what I found was worse than I expected. Brooke had misclassified employees to avoid taxes. There was a mountain of back pay and penalties coming like a wave. She defaulted on vendor agreements. There were cancelled insurance policies no one noticed. The new software she'd forced everyone onto was so poorly configured that invoices weren't going out on time, meaning clients weren't paying, meaning payroll was collapsing. There was a $45,000 campaign that produced exactly 0 new clients because the influencer she hired turned out to have a reputation for scamming. Brooke had expensed luxury items as client gifts. There were receipts for restaurants where no clients were present, and through all of it, she was still paying herself a 6-figure salary. I built a report, 23 pages, clean, direct, unavoidable. I mapped immediate threats, midterm recovery plans, and long-term strategy shifts. I showed where money was leaking and how fast. I outlined what would have to happen within 30 days to avoid bankruptcy. My team helped me build a demo that showed how my company's scheduling automation could cut operating costs and improve reliability fast. Not theory, implementation steps. I emailed my dad. "We need to meet in person. All decision makers present." When I showed up that Saturday, Brooke was there, sitting like she owned the room. "I read your report," she said before I even sat down. "Cute, very, spreadsheet." My mum flinched. "Brooke, please." "No, I mean it," Brooke continued, folding her arms. "It's also logical and binary, but business isn't just numbers, Ethan. It's vision, relationships, storytelling." I stared at her. "Brooke," I said calmly, "your storytelling lost the company $280,000 last quarter." She rolled her eyes. "You're just bitter. You always have been. This isn't about saving Northbridge. It's about you trying to prove something." I looked at my dad, then my mom, waiting for them to intervene, to say enough, to defend me even once. They didn't, so I stood up. "You're right," I said. "This isn't about proving anything. I already did. I built my own company. I don't need validation." Then I turned to my parents. "But if you want this company to survive, she cannot be in charge, not even on paper." Brooke's mouth opened like I'd slapped her. "I'll help," I continued, steady, "but only if I have full authority, operational, financial, legal, everything." And Brooke steps down. My mom stood too fast, palms out like she could physically slow the moment. "Ethan, maybe we should talk about this calmly." "No," I said. "It's not a discussion. It's a decision." My dad looked torn. His pride in Brooke was still there, but so was exhaustion, real fear. And then Brooke said the thing that snapped the last thread of goodwill inside me. "If you do this," she said, pointing at me like a child, "I'll tell everyone you sabotaged me. I'll go online. I have followers. I'll say you planted bad data. You don't get to erase me just because you're jealous." The room went dead. My mom actually looked scared, like she'd heard that threat before. That's when I realized something. They knew, maybe not every detail, but they knew Brooke was unstable. They knew she'd burned the house down before admitting she built it wrong, and they still gave her the keys because they were terrified of breaking their golden girl illusion. I took a breath. "I'm done," I said quietly. "If you want my help, I want it in writing. Full authority. My lawyer will send terms. You have 48 hours. Brooke laughed, but it was hollow, just air and panic. "You think you're better than me?" she whispered. I walked to the door. "No," I said without turning back. "I know I am." My mom's voice cracked behind me. "Ethan, please, don't walk away from us." I paused, hand on the doorknob, and for a split second, the old version of me, the one who still hoped, wanted to turn around. But they still hadn't said what needed to be said, so I left. I didn't didn't scream in the car. I didn't cry. I didn't call my best friend and spiral. I just drove home with the windows down and let the cold air numb my face. My apartment was minimalist, more servers than furniture. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. Empty. Not sadness exactly. Not anger exactly. Just this strange feeling of finally letting go of a rope I had been holding for years, even though it was cutting my hands. For the first week, I did almost nothing. My team kept the consultancy running. We'd automated enough that it didn't collapse without me. Clients were stable. We were okay, but inside, I felt peeled back, raw. On day 8, I dug through a box in my closet and found an old composition notebook from high school. The cover was frayed, corners bent. Inside were sketches, early drafts of ideas I never had the skill to build back then. Tools for dispatching, simple dashboards, a concept for a platform that could make messy operations visible, trackable, fixable. I sat there turning the pages like they were a time capsule, and something clicked. If I was going to rise, it would be on my terms. No more waiting for my parents to understand. No more trying to prove anything to people who had trained themselves not to see me. That night, I stayed up until 4 a.m., mapping out a new product idea. Not for clients, not for consulting, for me. A real platform, a system, not a patch, not a bandage, a full rebuild. A week later, I met with someone who changed everything. My mentor, Serena, former CTO of a mid-sized tech company, now an investor who specialized in founders people underestimated. I'd met her years earlier at a startup event when my consultancy was still tiny. We sat in a quiet cafe and I told her everything. Not the emotional stuff first, the facts, the financial mess, the mismanagement, the way my parents still try to protect Brooke. Serena listened without interrupting. Then she leaned forward and said, "They underestimated you. That's their loss. But don't make it yours too." That sentence hit like a clean slap, so I stopped waiting. I shifted my company. It terrified my team at first. Consulting was steady revenue. Product building was risk. But I had savings. We had runway. And I'd rather gamble on my own vision than spend my life cleaning up other people's chaos. We formed a small product team. Me, my lead engineer Jordan, and a UX designer named Priya who had the rare gift of making complex systems feel simple. We worked out of my apartment at first. No fancy office, just laptops, coffee, whiteboards leaning against walls, and the kind of focused intensity that makes time disappear. The product was simple in theory, an AI-assisted operations platform for facilities and maintenance companies, small to mid-sized, so they could track crews, predict supply usage, catch scheduling errors before they turned into disasters, and see every leak in the system in real time. I named it LumenGrid because it was built to bring light to what people ignore. The first version launched in 7 months. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, and more importantly, it saved people money fast. We got our first beta users through old contacts. Then word spread, because in industries like that, people talk. If something makes their life easier, they tell their friends. If something saves them from weekend emergencies, they become loyal like you saved their marriage. By the end of year 1, we had over 400 businesses using it. I didn't take a paycheck. I lived quietly. No flashy upgrades, no new car, no vacations. It wasn't punishment, it was focus. Occasionally, I heard updates about Northbridge through cousins. My parents didn't reach out directly, but family gossip travels like smoke. Northbridge was hemorrhaging. Brooke doubled down on branding. She launched a reveal video about the company's new identity. She blamed old staff for being negative. She blamed clients for not understanding innovation. She blamed the economy, the patriarchy, the algorithm, anything but herself. I didn't comment, I didn't engage, I just built. Then LumenGrid got featured in a business publication as one of 10 tools reshaping operations. A month later, we got our first acquisition offer from a competitor I'd admired for years. I turned it down, not because the money wasn't tempting, but because I wasn't building this just to cash out. I wanted it to last. I wanted it to be undeniable. I wanted to be remembered as more than the kid in the garage. Then one morning, I woke up to an email. It was official, sent from Northbridge's domain. A formal request request for consultation on a last resort restructuring plan. They used the word I'd waited years to hear, help. Not because they wanted to be kind, not because they finally saw me, because they were drowning. The company was on the brink of collapse. Vendors were walking. A lawsuit had been filed by a supervisor claiming wrongful termination. Brooke had apparently disappeared for a week to attend a wellness retreat and wasn't answering emails. Their accountant had resigned mid-quarter and left no notes. They didn't just want me to help, they wanted me to save them, and for a brief moment, I almost said yes. Not because my parents deserved it, but because the employees did. People I remembered from childhood, people who had once handed me snacks at company picnics, people who told me you're going to be just like your dad someday. Then I read the last line of the email. We hope you'll consider this. Brooke did her best. Please understand this wasn't her fault. Even now they couldn't admit the truth, couldn't call it what it was, so I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Serena and my lawyer. If they wanted anything from me, it wouldn't be a favor. It wouldn't be guilt. It wouldn't be a quiet rescue behind the scenes. It would be business. It was strange how calm I felt drafting the response. No bitterness, no adrenaline, just clarity. Serena sat across from me in the small office we'd upgraded into after our first investment round. Glass walls, warm lighting, the kind of space I used to imagine when I was 16, coding at a shaky desk with takeout boxes stacked beside me. Now it was real, mine. I'm not doing this out of spite, I told her. I know, Serena said, and you're not doing it out of guilt either. That's the difference between reacting and leading. She was right. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to my family. I was responding to reality with leverage. The letter my lawyer sent wasn't aggressive. It was professional. It outlined the possibility of Lumen Grid acquiring Northbridge as a strategic consolidation. It wasn't a consultation offer. It wasn't a shared leadership plan. It was a buyout offer with conditions: complete operational control, ownership transfer within 45 days, all decision-making authority transferred to me and my board. Brooke removed from leadership and stripped of any role that could sabotage recovery. A non-disparagement agreement, a confidentiality clause, full access to financials and contracts immediately. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. I hit send and went back to work like it was any other day. Later that night, the response came. Not from my mom, not from my dad, from Brooke. Subject line: this is war. The email itself was a chaotic rant, accusations, insults, twisted logic. She accused me of manipulating our parents, of preying on vulnerability, of trying to erase her legacy. Then she wrote the line that made my stomach twist, not because it was true, but because it was familiar. You were never meant to lead, Ethan. You just waited in the background long enough for something to fall into your lap. For a moment, I believed it, not because it made sense, but because it was the script I'd been fed for years. You're not special, you're not Brooke. Stay in your lane. Then my mind replayed reality. The nights I stayed up coding while Brooke partied. The weekends I worked while she curated an aesthetic. The contracts I fought for. The clients I saved. The product I built brick by brick while she burned money on vibes. Nothing fell into my lap. I built everything with my own hands, so I didn't reply to Brooke. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and labeled it hostile communications. If she wanted war, she'd get silence and strategy. The next week was a blur of planning. My legal team drafted a formal letter of intent. Serena worked with our CFO to determine buyout limits. We didn't want Northbridge because I missed my family. We wanted it because the bones still had value. Contracts, infrastructure, a workforce that could recover under competent leadership. I started quietly reaching out to the people Brooke had fired, the ones she'd called old energy. They were wary at first, hurt, angry. But when I explained what I was doing, something shifted. They remembered me, not as the CEO's son, but as the kid who asked questions and listened. The kid who didn't talk down to crews. The kid who cared how things worked. One by one, they said they'd come back under conditions, and I respected that. Then came the curveball. My parents requested a meeting, not through lawyers, in person, at my office. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed trap, an emotional appeal, guilt, manipulation. But Serena convinced me. You don't have to agree, she said. But power isn't just what you hold, it's what you're willing to show up for on your terms. So I said yes. They arrived late. My mom looked exhausted, her blouse wrinkled, makeup smudged like she'd wiped tears away too many times. My dad looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally, like the weight of his own denial had finally bent him. They sat across from me in the glass conference room. My dad's eyes scanned the office, the clean design, the quiet hum of a functioning team, the confidence in the air. You've come a long way, he said. I have, I replied. Why are we here? My mom spoke first. We read the offer. We're not ready to sign over everything. I waited, didn't fill the silence, let it stretch. But, she continued, we're willing to give you partial control, a transition period, 6 months of shared leadership. I nodded slowly, then I stood up. Meeting's over. My dad startled. What? You don't have 6 months, I said, voice calm. You barely have 6 weeks. Your accounts are redlined. Your vendor relationships are broken. Your staff is leaving. Brooke is one impulsive post away from triggering a PR disaster you can't recover from. My mom's voice cracked. Ethan, please, it's still our company. No, I said. It was. Now it's a sinking ship and I'm offering a lifeboat. If you don't want it, that's your choice, but don't pretend you're still steering. Silence. Then my dad whispered something I didn't expect. She said she'd sue us. I blinked. What? Brooke, he said, eyes down. She said if we signed it over to you, she'd sue. Emotional damages. Claim we cut her out unfairly. Claim we destroyed her future. I actually laughed. A short, sharp sound. That's rich, I muttered. She destroyed herself. My mom wiped her eyes. My dad's hands trembled slightly. I softened, just a fraction. I'm not here to hurt her, I said. I'm here to save what's left, but I won't do it half blind. I won't do it with one hand tied behind my back. They looked at each other like people standing at the edge of something they'd avoided for years. My dad nodded slowly. We'll talk to the lawyers. That night, I stayed late at the office. I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Too much was still in motion, but something inside me felt steady. For the first time, I wasn't fighting for a seat at the table. I was building the table. My parents signed the papers 12 days later. Wednesday morning, a lawyer's office overlooking the city. Quiet room. Neat stacks of documents. The soft click of pens. My mom didn't look at me. My dad's hand shook when he signed the last page. Brooke wasn't there. She refused to attend. Sent a furious message the night before. You'll regret this, all of you. I didn't regret anything. The moment the deal closed, Lumengrid officially acquired Northbridge. We restructured, we renamed, not because I wanted to erase my dad's work, but because the old name was now poisoned. Brooke had turned it into a joke, a cautionary tale. We called the new company Bridgewell Operations, not for ego, for clarity. The first thing I did was walk through the old building alone. It was eerie. Dust in corners, empty desks, broken vending machines. Half the warehouse lights didn't even turn on. The dispatch board was stained with old marker ghosts. Paper schedules were still pinned up from months ago like someone froze time and walked away. My dad used to call this company his proudest achievement. Under Brooke, it had become a husk, so we gutted what needed gutting, kept what was worth keeping, brought in my team, implemented real-time tracking, updated payroll systems, rebuilt vendor contracts, rehired people who deserved to come back. I personally drove to meet Stan, the operations director Brooke fired. He was working at a hardware store wearing a vest that didn't fit right. When I walked in and said, "Stan, I want you back," his eyes went glossy. He didn't ask about salary first. He just shook my hand and said, "I've been waiting for this day." The staff meetings felt different now. No buzzwords, no glossy decks filled with empty slogans. We talked numbers, reliability, process, people, and people listened. Not because I demanded it, because they could feel the difference between performance and leadership. 3 months after the acquisition, we landed a major contract with a regional hospital network. They needed reliable, discrete maintenance, and supply coordination across multiple campuses. Zero tolerance for delays, strict compliance, high accountability. Old Northbridge would have collapsed under that pressure. Bridgewell executed flawlessly. Revenue stabilized, then grew, then doubled. Meanwhile, Brooke imploded. She tried to rally support online, posted a long filtered video titled "The Truth About My Brother's Takeover," painted herself as a visionary cut down by corporate greed and family betrayal. Her followers, mostly lifestyle fans and wannabe entrepreneurs, sympathized for about a week. Then reality surfaced. Screenshots, emails, receipts, invoices, internal memos leaked by ex-staff who'd had enough. A thread from a former vendor detailing missed payments. Another from an employee showing how Brooke had forced unpaid overtime while expensing luxury dinners. Turns out, trying to run a serious business while treating it like an aesthetic project doesn't hold up when people bring documentation. Her credibility collapsed fast. Sponsorships dropped. Her branding coach unfollowed her. Even the wellness retreat she'd been bragging about cancelled her guest speaker slot. She sent me one final message. "Congratulations, hope it was worth destroying your sister's future for a stupid company." I didn't reply, because it wasn't about her future, it was about everyone she stepped on while pretending hers mattered more. My parents stayed quiet after the sale. From what I heard, my mom stopped going to her book club because she couldn't handle the questions. My dad stopped talking about the company entirely. They hadn't just lost Northbridge, they'd lost the illusion they'd been living in, that Brooke was their dynasty, their proof, their golden investment. 6 months after the acquisition, my dad called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice sounded worn down, smaller, Ethan, I saw the article, he said, about your company, about Bridgewell. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I didn't believe in you sooner. That should have hit me hard. It didn't, because by then I didn't need it. I'd already won something bigger than the company, bigger than the money, bigger than the headlines. I won myself back. The kid in the garage, the teenager with the composition notebook, the man who was told to be realistic. He wasn't little anymore. He was the reason hundreds of people still had jobs, the reason vendors got paid on time, the reason the company didn't die. And my parents knew it now. Everyone did. We held a relaunch event at the new Bridgewell headquarters, a clean facility outside the city, modern systems, real training rooms, real structure. Clients came in, partners toured the warehouse, staff wore badges that didn't feel like costumes. I stood on a small stage at the end of the night, holding a microphone, looking out at a room full of people who actually understood what they'd built. No script, no slides. I want to thank everyone who stayed when it would have been easier to leave, I said. Everyone who kept showing up, even when things were messy. We didn't rebuild this with hype. We rebuilt it with process, with accountability, with the kind of quiet competence that doesn't look glamorous, but keeps the lights on. Applause rose, loud and honest. I stepped off the stage and walked outside into cool night air. Stars overhead, clear and indifferent. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anything. No bitterness, no need for revenge, no hunger for their approval. Just peace. Because in the end, they didn't just underestimate me. They handed me the perfect opportunity to prove them wrong. And I did it the only way I know how. Silently, relentlessly, without permission, and on my terms. And that was the last time anyone ever called me the background.